So yeah, like elections have been delegitimized for a long time now. Bill Clinton, 92, won only 43% of the vote. Terrible, right? He split it with two other candidates, granted, but it was still a new low for the Democratic Party. In 2008, we had great turnout. 2014, we now reach critical crisis levels because, 6 years didn't do enough, right? People didn't believe in it, right? Like it just wasn't enough. People could not believe in it. 2016, turnout was also lower. So those patterns were continuing, right? We had high turnout in 2008, dipped, right? And the only changes that we saw were in 2018, right? People responding explicitly to a Trump presidency. But, that's a transient thing. You don't get Trump to run against more than twice. Like this was, if you want to call this the left or the liberals or Democrats or whatever, if this was like the Democrats like best attempt, keep in mind this was their last attempt to have something as truly energizing as Trump, right? And that's scary, right? So, elections have been losing legitimacy for so long. I don't see how 2024 will change that in any way. All right, so let's now understand what happened in 2020 just by the numbers. Not some of this is based on exit polling. Not exit polling is not that reliable. I mean, we saw the general reliability of polls more broadly, right? The last two election cycles now. I get that, but as far as we could deduce anything, like I just want to talk about some of the stuff that's concrete and some of the stuff that's a little less concrete. So let's just see how Nate Silver's model did. He famously gave Biden 89 out of 100 in across 40,000 simulations. By the way, Biden polling wasn't necessarily all that much better over the last couple of months, but one of the ways that this model works is the more stable a race is, and this race was very stable. Like even 1 year ago, like back in November of last year, back in March of last year, any head-to-head polls of Biden and Trump almost always had Biden well ahead, and some of them were 25 points ahead or something. It has been stable. And it's been very stable for months and months, especially. So because of that, Nate Silver's model puts additional weight into a Biden win, right? He just, whatever proportionate weighing he does, but whatever the weighing is, like it weighs towards a Biden win. So this goes up. You notice a couple of times when the Hunter Biden stuff came out, this thing was at 90 or it was 89, then it moved down to like 88 or 87. After, in this model, a long kind of stable period like this, the Hunter Biden stuff, pushing it backwards, that is, that indicates that it does move the needle in some way. And again, hitting 90 and then with no Hunter Biden stuff, still seeing a dip down to 89. Something could have happened, right? That had these kind of ripple effects. Maybe that was the difference between, Biden winning or losing North Carolina. But, this was the most famous model in 2016 and in 2020. And just to give you, for the people that say it predicted 89 out of 100 and it won. Well, the reason why we expected more is not only the individual states that he aggregated, but in this probability, space, we're probably going to end up at 306, assuming that he gets Georgia and Pennsylvania and Nevada, which is my expectation. If we end up at 306, like somewhere around like here, right? Think about all these other probabilities in the model that just by since you're able to visualize it here, just like on how much space it takes up, like there was all this possibility for all this space, right? But instead, we just pluck the possibility from here. So this isn't like the best way to look at it, I guess. But the point I'm making is if you have like an 89 out of 100, you expect far more than 306 electoral college wins, right? This is votes. This is how people would just like interpret it in their heads. And 89 out of 100, you should expect something to be substantive and decisive. And I guess it was decisive in some ways, but it lost out in many others. So just visually here, let me just make sure that nothing was. I don't think they're updating this anymore. I think there's a static page now after the third. Just to give you a sense of what actually happened. So they predicted Florida, would go to Biden. The fact that it didn't, right? Even like better than looking at here, because there's like some stuff that you'd be mixing up, right? Because this isn't just like the kind of visual space that I described as, but this is more of that, right? Because this is it would be less confusing in some regard. So imagine that you have these ribbons, right? This is the expectation, and instead you chop off Florida, you chop off North Carolina, and you keep everything else. And the margins within the states that you do win, they're actually way tighter, right, than what you expected. So on the one hand, like, yes, you're only losing a couple of the states that you expected in this model, but the fact that you have tighter margins elsewhere and in general, right, just generally speaking, you have tighter margins, that means that you've lost legitimacy, right? You've lost like the mandate. It doesn't mean that you have to respect mandates. It doesn't mean that you have to respect numbers, right? Trump certainly didn't, right? He could, give a shit about what anybody other than his base thought, because why he didn't really need to. But even that, bit of wisdom actually is going to have to come out the window, as I'll tell you later. But you've actually lost a ton of legitimacy, and you've also lost, a bunch of like local seats, right? You've lost so many quote unquote winnable local races. There's been a lot of blame going around about like Democratic messaging about like defund the police and socialism, but I mean, for any, even if we concede that may be true in some districts, in some places, first of all, we just had a complete rural fucking intensification where everything that was blue got bluer, everything that got red and more rural got redder, right? So a lot of those losses came from that kind of geographical polarization, which, without actually having real policies in place, and all you have is a culture war to provide on the right or the left, you're going to win. You're going to lose something like 2020 rural seats, right? It just makes sense, like from that standpoint. And this was kind of like part of the original worry. Like I said, betting markets are saying 66, not 89, and we'll see results that are closer to the 66 betting odds as opposed to Nate Silver's 89. And that's what happened. It doesn't seem so bad because you only lose a couple of the lean blue that you thought you were going to get. But people are really underselling the implications of what transpired here. So, let me think of the best way to put this. Just think of the fact that we have, on the one hand, record turnout in this election, right? Trump has brought his base, his voters, out to Obama level turnout, 2008 level turnout, which I'm not sure it was historic by what margins in 2008, but it was historic, by modern margins, right? Obama did exceptionally well on questions like turnout by modern standards. And Biden, for his, to his credit, he brought out like 5 million more, but proportionally, Trump actually, he came from a smaller number and proportionally ended up at a larger number, right? In an absolute sense, Biden is probably going to get like maybe 4 or 5 million more votes than Trump is going to get, just completely nationally. but the proportion of Trump's increase is higher, right? It's more parabolic. It's more kind of like, like off the chart in that sense. Like if you were to measure that, I think statistically, you'll probably find some interesting conclusions about like turnout in general, right? Like the obviously like the stories are going to be Biden turnout because Biden wins the election, but what Trump did here also should not be understated, and it should especially not be understated due to the fact that every fucking macro issue on the planet that you can think of was against Trump. Okay. The majority of the media, right, and the public images that we consume of Trump are hated, right? Like these are images that people don't like. People don't think that Trump is a likable figure. People don't think that Trump is honest. People don't trust Trump on questions like coronavirus. A huge segment of the population absolutely hates Trump, right? In, a kind of a tribal fashion. So there's like a passion there. Trump had a good economy. It completely collapsed with coronavirus. People lost jobs. You only had one stimulus deal that, got people a little more than $2,000 over now, like 7-8 months of pandemic and shutdowns that are, just going in waves, and, small businesses is being eaten up by larger businesses. We have this intensification of these monopolies, right? All those trends we saw under Obama, they're intensifying. And people are dead, right? Like in terms of like a domestic policy failure, healthcare perennially is a failure in the sense that by not having universal healthcare, by not, dealing with things like, drug legalization, all those questions, right? We are, contributing to like hundreds of thousands, if not a lot more, deaths every single year, period. But in terms of like the highly visible domestic policy failures, like 250,000 people dead. It's probably going to end up, I said 250 maybe would be the end result. Clearly, I was being conservative there. We're probably going to hit 300,000 or 400,000 by the end of the winter. A huge policy blunder. And, every voter knows someone that got sick, or maybe they themselves got sick. Maybe they know someone that died. They see Trump denying this. The messaging about this from Democrats has been really good. They had so much money to flood airwaves. Trump should have lost this election, like on every kind of substantive ground that you can think of. And to Biden's credit, I guess Trump did lose this election, but people, when the polls were like Biden up 10 nationally, people were asking this question, and it's a relevant question to ask. Can you believe that Biden, after everything, after even remember, Trump also this year was the year of coronavirus, but he also got impeached successfully, right? He didn't get impeached and removed, but he did get impeached for, literally soliciting foreign election interference, right? Exactly what Mueller, the investigation, was trying to establish, he literally did with Ukraine. That's the ironic thing. And that was technically an illegal action, but he couldn't be held responsible because, maybe he colluded, maybe he did it in 2016, but he definitely tried to in 2019, right? That's the crazy part. So that's how 2020 started. By every macro factor, this should have been a fucking blowout. Biden was up by 10, and people were saying, can you believe that Biden is only up by 10? Which it's a relevant, perfectly reasonable question to ask. Why should Biden only be up by 10? Especially if you live in cities, especially if you live in, a more kind of, blue world, especially if you consume mainstream liberal publications, right? Biden should have been winning by double digits in the 20s and 30s and beyond. That was the thinking. And Biden barely squeaked by. Obama, the 2008 margins were, I think he won something like 363 electoral votes in 2008. That was brought down by 2012 to like 325. Trump won by like, I think his number was still in the high 200s. So Biden, I think is going to win more electoral votes than Trump won in 2016, but it's less than Obama in 2012. And I think that's such a nicely symbolic number because we know that in 2014, according to Ferguson, right? And I think all data suggests this, that was the first real, true fracture and crack. Maybe Ross Perot was like the pre-fracture, but 2014, that was a very obvious fracture that people did not pay attention to enough. That suggests both polarization and a lack of like belief in the political system, right? So we still have the belief, right? Here's the problem. We've still kept the belief in the lack of the belief in the political system, right? We still have that. We still can't imagine Biden doing anything substantive. And we also can't truly imagine anything, of any consequence, anything except negative coming out of the Trump presidency. So we don't have the belief, but we have like the psychotic polarization. We have the tribal thinking. We have the fact that Biden can bring turnout from 69 million in 2008 to like 75 million in 2020 on account of hatred for Donald Trump. And we can count on Donald Trump to bring the abysmal showing that McCain had in 2008 up to Obama levels in 2020. Trump now is, for many people, the Obama figure. In 2024, we're not going to have either Trump to run against or any kind of candidate that makes sense on our side. Like Biden 2024, first of all, I think even mainstream liberals admit that it's very possible that Biden is not going to be able to run in 2024. So the next logical pick, right? Classically, what would happen is we would have Kamala Harris like step in and be the de facto candidate. And there is definitely a subsection of the population that wants to vote for Kamala Harris, but it's simply not going to be enough. And we know this because like she was supposed to bring the black vote out, but and although like the black vote did come out and I think it's record numbers, but that simply followed turnout in general, right? That was not an explicitly black vote coming out for Biden Kamala Harris. That was everybody just being kind of like swept up in this like, wave of turnout on both sides, right? So, black people came out for that reason, but in places where minority support was critical, it wasn't there, right? Like the reason why people were panicking when Florida went to Trump is, first of all, although like the margins were already like very close to Florida and we didn't, people were expecting, maybe Florida could be lost. When it actually happened, if one state goes that your model says should not go, it does mean that you're going to get that level of polling adjustment in some level probably everywhere else, right? So, and the margins that Trump won Florida by, it was something by like 4 or 5% when the polling, was like I think 1 or 2% differential only. People started panicking. And the reason was, like, I remember, like, in the Friday before the election, like, I was reading a news story that Democrats are concerned that there is insufficient turnout for minorities for Biden, right? They're fearing they're going to lose Florida. And that's when you started getting, like, all the coping mechanisms come out. Like, yeah, but, we could lose Florida. It's fine. There's another path for us. I get it. That's fine. That's reasonable. That's all in keeping with this model and other models. But if you do lose Florida, it does mean there is some level of adjustment that's going to be made elsewhere. Ask yourself this question honestly. With a candidate like Biden, how much polling error are you able to stomach before dying? Clearly, Biden is able to survive more polling error than Clinton can. But the fact is, like, you don't want, on the one hand, either a president that loses, or, you know, what's going to happen in this situation, which is why I titled this stream, is the Biden presidency already dead? You're going to have a decapitated presidency, essentially. If you lose the Senate, if you don't get that kind of mandate, if you can't pass massive stimulus, if the stimulus is not going to be, you know, people centered, as it wasn't in, you know, 2009 going to 2010. With a Republican majority in the Senate, you're not going to have a people-centered one here either. And, you know, with the type of people that Biden was appointing to his cabinet, I mean, who knows? So, anyway, the point that I'm making is we have record levels of turnout, right? So, this is what I was saying. So the electoral model actually, you know, it was. It did not sufficiently build in this amount of polling error into it. That's just true. I know other people have ways of discussing this, but like, the fact is, like, 70 out of 100 for Clinton, 89 out of 100 for Biden. You would expect the net result from net silver to be closer to where we actually are, right? So there's something there that we're not getting, whether it's like the kind of people who answer these surveys, like they may not be reflective of society. They're probably not. There may be something else going on. There may in fact be like a shy Trump voter. People say that there's no such thing. It's not been statistically established, but I find that very hard to believe, in the same way that for years people were saying that it's not established that there's bias in police shootings of black men. And then in 2020 and back in June, we had the ultimate fucking drop of every source of police brutality and violence over the last 20 years in America. And we definitely see the most comprehensive bias when controlling for everything but race, right? But skin color. We see that bias, right? So these things change. There's something there that's not being caught, right? Conservatives are, you know, under attack in the sense that numerically, first of all, we know that they're outnumbered. We know that more people agree with liberal platforms than vice versa. And we know that there is punishment for things that can be construed as conservative or racist or anything. That is broadly put in this category of this is modern day conservatism. People lose jobs. People get, you know, piled on. They're not popular in the sense that, like, you know, they're not celebrities really. They're not, I'm sure there's like some element of like the shy Trump voter compounded with like, who is the average person, right? That actually goes and answers these polls. So 2008, okay, so these margins, great margins for Obama, nothing to complain about. Obama, lost like 30 or 40 electoral college votes here. He won Idaho in 2008. He lost it in 2012. He won Indiana, I think, in 2008, lost it in 2012. Clinton also did not win Idaho or Indiana. He easily won Pennsylvania and the Rust Belt. What Biden did now, though, so assuming that he won Georgia, if he wins Georgia, Georgia hasn't been won since, I believe Bill Clinton won it in 1992. I think he lost it in 1996. Nevada, I think even Nevada, Bill Clinton lost, and Bill Clinton also won Arizona, has not been won by a Democrat since now. So if in fact Arizona goes for Biden, and that's the thing, Arizona, I didn't check in the last couple of hours, but Arizona was getting closer and closer to Trump's favor. So I think now it's sort of like people are kind of the consensus position is AP and Fox should not have called Arizona on, I think it was on election night for Biden. And Fox News partly did it to essentially say, we know where the power's going. Fuck you, Trump. Trump had this crazy, screaming phone call, ostensibly, who knows, by the reporting, to Rupert Murdoch, and Murdoch just, again, according to the same reporting, just hung up on him. And that was it. I wonder who if somebody saw that, who saw that on what end. Maybe they heard screaming from Murdoch's and they just they saw Murdoch hang up, or maybe Trump was like hello, and people were like fuck, he got hung up on. But anyway, I shouldn't get too off track here. So Georgia and Arizona, let's assume that it goes to Biden. So that's going to be new, right? North Carolina, Obama won in 2008. Obama lost it in 2012. He won Virginia. Biden lost Virginia, so that's one thing, right? There are places that Biden did lose, right? Again, he's not going to end up with the same count as Obama in 2012. Even in the best case scenario, it's going to be only 306. Yeah. So we see some interesting shifts. We see Nevada is interesting because it seems like it's going to be less close. Nevada honestly seems like if it wasn't called yet, it should have been called. Actually, I think that's the consensus position. Arizona, we should wait on. Nevada should have been called. Nevada has not been one since 1992 as well. I don't think Obama won it in either year, and that speaks to we have an interesting Latino shift, right? So we have a shift in the Latino population, in really you would expect border towns to be hostile to Trump and his kind of deporting agenda, his build the wall agenda, but honestly, it just seems to me so many people are liberals that write about race-related stuff and behavior. They don't know anyone other than white people of a certain kind of background, right? So it's not just white people in general. It's a certain kind of white person. If you know black people, or if you've known Hispanics, right, living in a place where you've known Colombians, you've known Ecuadorians, you've known Cubans, you've known Hispanics that were born in America, and their family has been born in America for a generation or many generations, for that matter. As many people in these border towns are, they are Hispanics from a century ago, right? Mexicans from a century ago. They could have been immigrants at some point, but things have changed for them. They're not necessarily doing badly in a lot of these border towns. They might be hostile to people coming in illegally. Maybe their families came over illegally years and years ago, but that's distant, right? No matter where you're in society, you want to feel you've started at a blank slate, because then you could justify all the good things that happen to you, which oftentimes are just nothing more than luck. I said last stream, I've known Hispanics that they would they'd be born abroad, in Ecuador or something, but they could still be talking shit about Mexicans. This is just reality, right? Race, as white people understand it, is not race as other people understand it. Even something thinking of people in Russia as traditionally white, that itself is kind of a problem, because very little of their political experience matches the white world's political experiences, right? No white person living in Russia has ever had anything that we would call, a democratic election, like ever, right? Whether they were born 50 years ago, or whether they were born 20 years ago, they have never experienced, a liberal style democracy, right? For many, Hispanics that were selected for and end up coming to America and ended up actually doing well, right? Because they were, again, the bottleneck effect, right? The only people that can fucking leave these immigrant countries are the people that can leave these immigrant countries. The tautology is its own fucking best explanation here. We select for you. Yes, you do better and better. People that are coming, across the border, right? Or people that are on welfare, for example, that your tax money is going into a system that you're not really benefiting by directly, even if there's like intellectual arguments that it's really great overall and society benefits, right? Like, you understand you're not benefiting from any of that, right? There's like a certain segment of the Hispanic population in Nevada that, goes for Biden, fine. That's great for, for the Democratic Party. But if Florida is always going to be a toss-up in this way, right? If we have this like intensification of passions in places like Texas, if we have Trump like literally improving his margins with black people by like 3 times. I don't know if the statistic just makes it sound dramatic or what, but he definitely expanded, right, his share of the black vote. So although, yes, we had a tremendous increase in black voter turnout simply just like by pure numbers, right? You can't just generically say that, in any other environment, this turnout would have gone to Democrats, right? You can't take that for granted anymore, right? Which should scare Democrats because since 1936, right? Since the second New Deal, we've had a complete realignment where, ethnic minorities just completely put their weight behind the Democratic Party. That's being eaten into little by little, but we see this in ways that are just completely unexpected, right? Like, I mean, like, just think about the fact that we had coronavirus, right? We had yes, we had the black. It's not black. It's kind of like incredibly, but it's going to affect the black community, disproportionately because the kinds of crimes that we incarcerate people for in America, they are the kinds of crimes that are available to black people in black communities, right? That's reality. Crime is character driven, not poverty driven. Poverty has a certain kind of crime. Wealth allows you to engage in another kind of crime. So because Trump was able to pass this like the 2015 era legislation, like his crime bill, he took credit for it as his crime bill, although he functionally pretty much did nothing to it except let it pass, right? He basically didn't veto it, right? That's his involvement with the bill. Black people saw that, right? And despite what liberal media was messaging, and despite also Trump's own words and his like racist language, and the fact that, yes, he does do racist dog whistles, that's like part of his strategy, right? They didn't care enough, right? They voted for Trump anyway. Despite coronavirus like completely ravaging, the black community, they voted for him more than 2016 anyway, right? Despite the fact that disproportionately black people are the ones who are being affected, by the economic downturn, right? And not getting this kind of aid, right? They still, have, he still increases his share, right? So, and this technically shouldn't be happening, right? In the same way that, we had Republicans banking on, winning forever the suburban vote, in like 2008 and later. But that didn't happen because instead what happened was because their brand of politics is so toxic, its logical conclusion was going to have to be, Donald Trump. That kind of highly visible monstrosity turned people off so much that the suburbs actually, the good, empathetic, liberal, educated suburbs said, we don't want anything to do with Trump. We're going to turn out to defeat him, right? So, so here's my problem, right? So Bill Scher has this tweet. So he says, with such historic turnout, you can't easily argue there's something Joe Biden could have done to pull in more unlikely voters. And Trump voters are Trump voters. They were not going to flip. The margin is what it is because America is what it is. So yeah, I just find this, let's use the woke terminology, problematic on a number of levels. So first is just like on its face, like, okay, so with such historic turnout, can you say Joe Biden could have done something more? I mean, yes, I think we can. I think there's like some, at minimum, even if it's not like revolutionary stuff, there are some individual policies that he could have like signaled about for months and months, in a way that would have brought more people out. One thing that I just couldn't understand over the last couple months was I was like, fuck it, like Joe, like why doesn't he just announce that he's going to back like federally legalized marijuana, right? He's going to back that, right? And he's going to put money, into research. He's going to put money into sales. Have the government actually run this shit, right? Like maybe with marijuana, it's like less dangerous, I guess. But a lot of these, like if you want to legalize all drugs, the private sector should have very little to do with it. With marijuana, it seems like not as much of a problem, but I do think there's probably like an issue with like trying to make marijuana more and more powerful, or like having incentives in place for things that are just other than safety, right? This shouldn't be a profit-driven thing. So Biden could have announced like legal marijuana. Like, are you like given how well that it polls in general, and given how easily it could be tied to like immediately like releasing anybody with marijuana offenses out of prison, having and saying, listen, like with legal marijuana, let's put some of the tax money into some kind of package for anybody that was in fact incarcerated for marijuana at some point, if they're like a if they're like a non-violent offender, or like if they were just using or selling. Imagine that. Imagine anybody out there that was incarcerated for marijuana or jailed for marijuana gets some kind of like reparations, right? That's a fucking like, yes, it's going to, affect, the black vote probably, more from the incarceration standpoint, because we know there's that asymmetry there. But, even like fucking white kids that, like the 20-year-olds that went out to vote for fucking Kanye West, or they wrote in Hillary Clinton as a joke. Though they could have been like prime pickings for a federal marijuana guarantee, right? So on its face, like I don't believe there's nothing that could have been done. But I don't want to dismiss this, right? Bill Scher, like I said, he's a smart guy. You have to, on the one hand, say that yes, turnout is really high, and you have to also wonder how much leeway was there explicitly for Joe Biden to have changed the count, right? And I think, like, I'm not sure if Bill Scher realizes this when he was tweeting it, but he explicitly said Joe Biden, right? And I think this is key to everything. Is there something that Joe Biden, being who he is, given his history, given his age, given the perception that people have about him on the left, on the right, whether it's fair or not fair, we don't have to adjudicate that. Can Joe Biden, being Joe Biden, drive more people out than he did? And I think the answer is, I don't think Joe Biden is Bill Scher's like ideal candidate. I think like, if he were to go back, right, he probably, would have, asked for Klobuchar or somebody, that was younger, somebody that at minimum had maybe some, some potential to like not be like the old white guy running against the old white guy. I think, people sort of see that. So I think you could answer the question partly in the affirmative by saying, Joe Biden, sorry, with that nominee, there's very little that he could do. I think one could say that. But again, going back to policy, there are probably individual policies. And there's also the fact that just the way that the Democratic Party is constituted, and what they're currently offering and what seems to be the most effective, like, political tactic over the last few years, which is make it all about Trump. And in this case, also make it all about coronavirus. Not saying that it's justified or not. I'm just saying that it's an effective tactic, and it's a tactic that really makes people go really fucking nuts. It's also true that there's a ceiling to turnout based on polarization, right? There's a ceiling to that. There's only so much that you could squeeze out of people if you don't give anything to them. One of the brilliant things about, everybody like having a fucking smartphone now is it's like, you don't have to really improve their standard of living in any substantive way. You could improve it enough that they could have a smartphone now with Twitter on it when they used to not have that before. And you could have things like Twitter, which is free. They could make accounts. They could follow other accounts, which is free. And they could activate just mentally, things about their, honestly, a lot of this is like fucking pleasure sensors. I mean, who doesn't fucking love it? This is so much better than football. Like I've never been into sports. Like I used to when I used to play basketball as a teenager. I used to watch basketball, I guess, a little bit. It was only like a couple of years that I even played. Because it's like, you have like no skin in the game. Like the messaging isn't everywhere. It's like, it's whatever. But this really pulls you the fuck in. Like you as a Democrat, like you could keep getting elected and reelected. You don't have to do shit except make sure that people are tuned in just enough into Twitter and elsewhere on TV, whatever, that they can be radicalized. Okay. If you don't have cable news anymore, fuck it. You could just have a broadband connection. Just look at YouTube clips. Get yourself so motivated to vote, right? But there's only so much that you can do with that, right? There's only so much that allows for. There's the second part, right? And Trump voters are Trump voters. They were not going to flip. Maybe not. I thought this was the assumption, right? I didn't think that we would have that many Trump voters. I didn't think they were going to flip, but I mean, I'm not sure what Bill Scher thought of the Lincoln Project, or if he thought it was like a good idea to do it. But I mean, ultimately, I think they got like close to or maybe over $100 million. They focused a lot on races that ultimately, were lost. These former and still are conservatives probably that, lost out, when Bush was essentially invalidated by the Obama years. They needed like something new to jump on. And it's like, well, we don't trust you that much because you were the Bush guy then. What's the new fucking thing you could do, right? Like, here's a new avenue you could go on. That the resistance is very valuable. Bunch of money was dumped into that. I follow an account called Trump Regrets, which is fun. And, anecdotally, it seems there's tons of people that, they're just going to flip. But, at the end, I was like, things are so polarized that the only reason we're going to have like massive turnout is because of Trump. Like I was waiting for this fucking turnout. But I always said the following. I said, don't worry about historic turnout. Worry about whether in a proportional sense, you could get the right people to turn out in the right numbers, in the right ways, and make sure especially that you're not losing support with important voting blocks. It's great if you pick up support, but you should not be right now, during a time like coronavirus, during a time like this completely fucking ridiculous Trump presidency. You should not be getting this close and losing any support, right? It doesn't make sense. And if you are, you're doing something wrong. And you can't just keep saying, oh my goodness, the other side is so good at this. It's not my fault. It's their fault. It's partly the fault of the electorate, obviously, right? We have a dumb fuck electorate, and we get dumb fuck candidates. Like, it's just, it is what it is. Before we even get to it is what it is. It's not that they were not going to flip, right? First of all, much of the narrative was they were going to flip, and second, he actually got more Republicans voting for him this time around. So the net effect of Lincoln Project, of all this media messaging, of all these just decorated fucking figures from the CIA and the FBI and even a complete like Bolton is going to come out and write a book, a tell-all book about the presidency of Donald Trump, right? And everybody's condemning them. Internationally, Trump is being condemned. Republicans are condemning him. Romney takes his principled stances. Jeff Flake, Paul Ryan just can't fucking take it anymore, and he's going to quit, right? You think this is a repudiation, but instead you have newfound strength, right? You have this newfound strength in the Republican base, right? It is there, right? By these two accounts, that literally has happened, right? You brought turnout to Obama era levels, and that proportional swing is more impressive than the swing from that Biden essentially was able to make, right? You take the naders of each, and you go to the peaks of each. That swing is really impressive to me, and I'm just I'm surprised that I haven't seen it analyzed. Who knows who's doing it? But I would actually take a look at that as something that is going to foretell at least a chunk of the future going forward. Okay. And the relative weakness in what we were able to do. We have absolute numbers, right? They have proportional numbers. They also have the Electoral College, which is not going anywhere anytime soon, right? We have an intensification in rural America. That's not going to get better. And it's especially not going to get better because there's no policy that's going to be put on offer over the next 4 years that's going to make it better, okay? You're not trying to win those voters. If you're Biden now, what are you trying to do for 2024? You're trying to just consolidate what you've won, okay? So whether or not you think that's a good strategy, right, amorally, just understand that the people that are doing the worst in America now and have been for a few decades now, their lives were not going to be substantially better, right? At least not better enough to plug up the holes, right, in this ever-growing divide, right? In an absolute sense, it would always get better again. I would rather be the average person, that's desperate enough to vote for Trump, or the median person rather, in some, county in Alabama, than I would that same person 200 years ago. That's a fact, right? So things long enough time span, I believe they're going to get, better and better. But, if you're Biden, right, your strategy is, I want to consolidate what I have, which is, okay, I don't seem to be having the black vote. That seems to be ebbing away. What if I consolidate my, my base in the suburbs, right? And my problem with that strategy is there's just no evidence that it's going to stick around. I mean, we didn't get this insane historic vote turnout in 2016, and people knew what the stakes were, right? To the extent that the stakes were discussed, and Trump was on everybody's mind, and Trump was going to put people into concentration camps and engage in pogroms and so on and so forth. That was the message, right? To the extent that he was a candidate that was just nothing more than the puppet of a Putin, those were the stakes as they were being messaged. And did people care enough to vote? Black people didn't. People in general didn't. The suburbs didn't. Not for Trump, not for Clinton. But Trump did have the more energetic base. That is true. You can look at it in the financial records. His vote, his financial contributions, he got way more individual small contributions than Clinton did. And by the way, Bernie Sanders, of course, dwarfed, everybody in 2016 and 2020 in small donations, which is, that's honestly the future, right? Once, that genie's out of the bottle now for 2 election cycles. We had 33% of the vote, 2 election cycles, didn't make any inroads, but we know that it's possible. We know that theoretically these candidates can win, and I think we're going to get it sooner rather than later. Anyway, so Biden wants to consolidate a base, and that base, I don't think it's going to exist, right? It did not exist in 2016 because people didn't care. They just assumed Hillary was going to win, and they were like, fuck it. 2018, they got fed up with Trump. This is true, but that was true even if, like, substantively, like, their lives probably from 2016 to 2018, it probably did get better. I forget if 2018, I think the stock market was making all-time highs pretty much every year that Obama was in office after 2013. 2013 was all-time highs, and I think it was every year into 2018 when we had that the crash on the trade deal in December 2018. So I think people probably objectively, they were doing better, right, over those 2 years. But they were disgusted with, like, the grift and the graft. They were disgusted with, like, the fact that we had a Mueller investigation that seemed like it was going to turn something up. And of course, it did turn something up, right? It turned up 11 potential instances of obstruction of justice into the investigation that could not find wrongdoing by Trump. So, like they were fed up with those issues, right? They were fed up with that, like, turned up electrification, like, in the media, right? They were, and some of it was objective. I mean, like, yeah, he has, like, Trump has, like, conflicts of interest that are new. He definitely abuses office in ways that are kind of, like, more intense and more visible. This is all true. He definitely weakened certain institutions, and he definitely weakened the stability of the international order to the extent that you accept it or believe in it or even want it to continue to exist. But, like, what's going to happen in 2024, right? Is this base winnable forever? Like, are people forever now going to be stuck in this, like, and honestly, like, for this to be competitive for both parties, like, it's honestly in Trump's best interest now, personally, to, like, turn into, like, the insane fucking, I'm going to now, like, just stand around and act insane and, like, get my own, like, media venture and talk about the stolen election and tell Fox News, your viewers won't forget, and tell voters, like, anybody that defected, we won't forget. And we're just going to take them, and we're going to be essentially this, like, de facto fucking lobby group now for, the GOP. And because we're doing that in the background, we could still have, the media doesn't want to talk about Biden's failures. So we're going to talk about the failures of the GOP and their obstructionism, because, Trumpism isn't going to die. It's just going to be this, like, it's just going to be like a more virulent kind of, like, annoying form of, like, Obama era GOP obstructionism, right? That's going to be the new Trumpism now. Just politically speaking, we're going to see some pretty interesting cultural phenomena, but that's separate from what I'm talking about. So it's actually in Trump's best interest and the Republicans' best interest for, Trump to, like, remain this kind of figure. Like, his specter always has to be there in the same way that, listen, Obama's specter, had to be here all throughout 2016 into 2020, into this election. Like, I was talking to somebody that was saying, like, it's clear that, looking at the margins for Biden versus Clinton, the Rust Belt, was clearly just, like, sexist, about Clinton. Men didn't want to vote for her. And it's like, well, I'm sure that could be part of the explanation. Like, I'm sure, like sexism probably did play some role there, but there's like 5 other explanations. Like all these men in the Rust Belt, they could be like, hey, this guy, he looks like my dad used to look, right? Let me vote for him. Or, he was born in Scranton, and, he looks like me, he talks like me, and I like that. Or they could like the fact that Biden, he did win, more union support, I think, than Hillary Clinton did, which is like, this is also, union members are a voting bloc, right? If their union tells them this is the candidate that we support, the union generally votes in that direction. So there's so many explanations there, and it's what will Kamala Harris versus anybody look like? Let's say Kamala versus Josh Hawley in 2024. Let's say that's like a probable outcome. Does anybody think that we're going to get the same turnout if Trump is not this like specter in the background? Because, again, like Biden voters, like some of them could have been leftover Obama voters that did not vote for Trump, but now they think maybe it's going to be some kind of return to the Obama years, which they might remember fondly. Like ostensibly, that's also a possibility, right? But you don't have it forever. The last thing that annoys me about this, though, is well, that's not true. This tweet doesn't annoy me, but this line does annoy me, though. The margin is what it is because America is what it is. I mean, yes, in the most kind of extreme tautological sense, this is true, obviously, right? But this is such a cop-out answer because the question naturally is, why is the margin what it is? Like, and why is America what it is, right? Like, that is something that we need to answer, because once we have an answer for that, right, why America is what it is, it's going to inform the rest, okay? That strategy, like, can Joe Biden do something else? Do we need another candidate that can reasonably have a higher ceiling when it comes to turnout? Is there some combination of things that we can or cannot do? Is the messaging in the media, can it be more disciplined or better in some way? The Democratic Party establishment, right? Should they be forming, some sort of like coalition government, like in 2016, right? Logical question now. Did it make sense, knowing that, Jill Stein was polling over 1%? Did it make sense to try to get all her voters over to your side? If not all, then maybe half or a quarter, right? Or like Obama did, he got 4/5 of that 1% in 2008, right? So there was no fucking green vote in 2008 because, people didn't want to vote green, I guess, when you have Obama. So that was a logical question, but answering this is what it is question, that informs that strategy. You can't just leave this open-ended in this way. And the reason why I bring this up is like it strikes me as very, very reasonable to say that America is what it is largely because of what's been happening with turnout, with party messaging, with the kind of candidates that we've had, right? This isn't just something that just happens, like by random. Like, we didn't just stumble our way into this kind of position. Like, that didn't happen, okay? We didn't just stumble through to polarization, to 3% pre-Jacksonian America turnout in 2014 midterms. We didn't just stumble into lower turnout yet again in 2016, and we didn't by random get to historic turnout today, okay? That was baked into so much of the strategies, right, of the political parties. Both political parties, they need to and want to play a culture war game. They have to, because again, going back to Thomas Ferguson, when he did analyses of 2016 messaging, he said that Hillary Clinton spoke about policy less than any other candidate in history that he analyzed, at least. I'm not sure, how far he went back, but she didn't talk about it, right? There was no energy there. So if there's no energy there, but you still need to make sure that some people still vote for you, what do? You got to go out there and you have to take to Twitter. You have to go on, the cable late night shows. You have to, get on, you have to send out like a very specific kind of political message. Both parties are doing this, and neither party offers any truly credible alternatives, not just in the platforms that they have. Like, the platforms sometimes are okay. I think Biden's platform, it wasn't the best, but it wasn't terrible. $15 minimum wage. Listen, for inflation, minimum wage needs to be $22 right now just to make up that gap that's been forming for decades. And still, people would be behind that experience that gap. It's only now new earnings would be subject to like inflation adjustment earnings. I get it, but 15, that's a substantial improvement. Carbon neutral by 2050. Listen, if you could pull that off, America as a whole carbon neutral by 2050. If China gets its 2060 goal like it wants, and everybody else says 2050 or 2060, we avert the worst of the warming, and probably at that point we can keep warming below 3 degrees, which is unpleasant, but it can be dealt with in a way where we don't have substantial changes. Maybe we could keep it to, I think the latest like consensus is like 2.6 degrees minimum. Like, I think it's reasonable to say that it's possible, but it's the platforms are a performative contradiction, right? The platforms are this is what we offer you, but we're gonna stack our administration full of like fossil fuel lobbyists, right? And then we have people like Bernie Sanders saying, "Hey, Biden, I think you might actually lose this election. I fear that you might lose this election because you're not going to get some of that Bernie energy turnout, which fractures along racial lines. It fractures along youth lines. And that seems to be what happened, right? Bernie's fear might have been overstated in the sense that Joe Biden didn't bleed enough support to lose the election, but clearly the warning should have been heeded. This should have been not as close as it is, okay? This should not be as close as it is. So when we ask why America is the way it is, listen, a huge reason why that's the case is we have no central inertia that could drag us away from these like two fucking forces that are pulling only in one direction. They're not pulling you to the left. All these fucking like down ballot Democrats and like rural places that say like, oh my God, we lost because of like the socialist messaging, the messaging about, defund the police. Like, yeah, like, like I agree, like that messaging is bad. I agree that defund the police messaging in an attack ad is very easy to kill off a candidate in that way. But, beyond that, like not having anything of policy to offer to people that, are not going to believe in you, like you're not going to get that turnout. You're going to get the suburbs, but you're not going to get the black vote in the way that you wanted. You'll get them in absolute levels, but you're not going to get them in proportional levels because proportionally, right? We're going to get over 70 million for both candidates, right? In absolute sense. But Trump, he's doing better with black people. He's doing better with women. He's doing better with Latinos, and with black people. It's not like it's not such a substantial difference that probably would have swayed the election. Otherwise, I don't think. But with Latinos, it's a substantial increase, and a lot of that absolute rise, like that Trump is going to get like over 70 million votes. That McCain got what 59, 58, and then Obama got 69. So that bridge that he being able to bridge that divide, right? That was also the Latino vote, right? That was also the black vote. That, by the way, now broke more in his favor. So you didn't really like some of these groups that on paper seem like you did okay with or well with. Some of them you still have done well with, and some of them you do better than expected with. But others, like the more granular that you get, like, you know, black people, like you know, like when you now start looking at the proportions, or black people from, like, you know, certain places, or you know, Latinos, you know, in certain states, like the more granular that you get, the more these kinds of like extreme racial realignments that we're finding. And the more these realignments that we're getting, you know, it's not clear to me that Democrats have a strategy here going into 2024. Like just natively, like by the fact that they don't have someone who is like someone that can, you know, garner any kind of substantial support in 2024. Like, we're not going to get this repeat. We're not going to get this like disproportionate outsized move. And maybe if like things are polarized still enough, like maybe you get like something less than this, but you know, that would equally apply, right? That would equally apply. Like, think about the fact that we could say historic turnout, but we don't have a historic victory here. We have historic turnout, but we have a historically generic win that just seems like a funeral. Like, does anybody feel energized about this shit? Is anybody excited about this now? Because I'm not excited about this now. You know, like I was hoping at minimum that, you know, as much as like didn't believe that Biden would be able to do anything, I was hoping at minimum one of two things could happen. You know, there's an absolute win by Biden, win the expand the House, win the Senate, court packing, and one of two things could happen. He could either, like, you know, not court pack and just run like a generic Obama-esque figure, and then, you know, we have a probable loss coming within 4 to 8 years, or he's just gonna say, you know what, fuck it, like, since we can't really milk this thing anymore, since we don't have a Trump anymore, since like Trump was like the culmination and the apotheosis of our fucking culture wars, let's just do the only thing we fucking can to, like, greedy fucking pigs with a slot bucket to get as many votes as we possibly can, period, in the most disgusting way possible. Because the best way to do that is to give people policies they could physically feel and that they will absolutely miss if they're gone. And if you say, you know what, let's push through universal federal job guarantee. Anybody that wants a job, $15, $20 an hour, great benefits. Let's say you don't even do universal health coverage. Let's say you just say public option, but you get a job if you want it. Starting $20, building a paid training. And then after the paid training, you do this job building green infrastructure, which will accelerate growth the older that you get and the older that your kids get. Therefore, fucking like investing in your vote for the Democratic Party forever. Fuck it. Marijuana legalization. All the kids that do want to smoke weed and would be energized by that, you fucking have them. You fucking have a pothead when they're 20. You have that pothead forever, assuming that he or she stays a pothead. Let's say that you do, you know, some sort of like guaranteed housing. Let's say you do a fucking like UBI stimulus check, $1,000 every month for the next 12 months, you know, for the duration of coronavirus. Let's say you don't even radically change the wealth disparity between black people and white people. You're still giving black people cheap healthcare. You're still giving black people a universal job in places where they might have either unemployment or, you know, Trump bragged about his low unemployment, but these are like, a lot of these are just like shit jobs. What about actual jobs that are useful, that are, you know, technical, that are competent, that comes with training, that can then be extrapolated to other industries where you could, you know, enter from that $20 job to a $25 job once you're done with your like new iteration of Civilian Conservation Corps. Once you do that, anything that I've just listed, if Republicans try to take away, they will never ever fucking win an election again. If you're used to getting $1,000 just like every month, or if you think that's just see $500, $200, $100 every month, and you have a public option, why couldn't they appeal Obamacare? Because if people have healthcare and suddenly 10 million people who have it don't, they're not going to vote for you because you're the incumbent. And that's how, if we have a two-party system, you have to understand this, like all these like racial realignments, if we have a two-party system, this is how the fucking ping pong works. Republicans repeal Obamacare. Clearly they're the bad guys. We're going to vote for Democrats. Democrats get into office. They don't expand healthcare into a public option, and therefore premiums are out of control, and we feel like it's fucking 2004 again. So therefore, Democrats are the evil ones. Oh, the Republicans must be the good guys. We're going to vote for them. Republicans get into office. They fucking repeal even the bullshit that you do have. They're the evil ones. Democrats get into office. And, at some point, right? At some point, there has, you squeeze people enough. If you give them only the culture war, only Twitter, only media consumption, they're eventually going to notice, right? And if you give them instead policy initiatives, whether or not some of these policies are popular now, I think Bill Scher would argue that some of these policies, depending on how you phrase them, even if they're really objectively good policies, they're just not popular at all. I think there's, critiques you can make of Medicare for all in the way that it's oftentimes presented, that most people simply, it would actually be a disavowal of public will to actually go for that. And I think there's ways to present these questions where, people actually do want to vote for those policies. But if you give someone something like universal health care or a job guarantee, like, you have them by the fucking balls for life. Like, do you not understand that? For as long, like I can understand like taking things 4 or 8 years at a time, but you have to fucking prepare for the contingency that the New Democrats would be a bust, and you need something other than an Obama-esque New Democrats strategy that is like kind of taken spiritually from like Clinton's DLC from 1984. Right? Or maybe like think about this, like the healthcare plan that Biden is running on. That healthcare plan it's like Obamacare from 2008. Now I know there's some differences, but like the most substantive difference between then and now is you'll have like less of a hurdle to make it better, and you could actually finally 12 years later, right? After fucking Lieberman is out of the picture, you could finally pass a public option. And, that's better than nothing. But if that promise or that set of promises energized people in 2008, they're not going to energize you in 2020. So, to answer the question, could there be more turnout? For some policies, maybe not. Maybe some lefty policies are toxic for turnout. But some other policies, yes. Some other candidates, fucking definitely. Okay, so it's not so much that Bill Scher is wrong for some of the assumptions here. I think some of these assumptions are correct, but the key answer is Joe Biden probably had a ceiling, and to be more nitpicky about it, yes, there are individual policies that could have made even a bad case scenario. What Joe Biden is, he's not a good case scenario for winning. Obviously, right? And this has been proven, right? I don't think, is anybody going to deny this now? Like, Joe Biden, like, wasn't the best candidate, right? Like 306 electoral votes is not the best that Democrats can reasonably do in a situation where you have historically one of the least popular figures that's an incumbent presiding over a historic fucking economic downturn and historic fucking numbers of deaths that are just accelerating into election day. Don't tell me that 306 electoral votes is the best that you could fucking do. It's the best that you can do under the fucking circumstances. Under what Bill Scher said, under America as presently constituted. Under current levels of A, polarization, and B, no inertia. There is no fucking inertia in place to keep you from moving to the left, right? Everything is being pushed to the right. This is what you have to understand. Reagan gets into office, steep-ass tax cuts. plus deregulation. What do we have under Clinton? Very mild tax increases. Definitely not pre-Reagan levels. Very mild tax increases above the new baseline. And enough subsidies for corporations that they don't give a fuck that you're doing these tax cuts, right? Or these tax hikes, rather, right? Bush gets into office, even steeper tax cuts, more deregulation, right? To build upon the deregulation under Clinton. Obama gets into office, very mild tax increases. Wall Street bailouts, right? Everything steadily seems to be reaching some sort of like singularity, right? And that singularity looks like a corporatist power structure where you have a bunch of companies that, although there's many of them, a few of them become just super predators, eating up, smaller businesses, eating up messaging. Right now, California passed that. I forget the name of that thing about Uber is now allowed to treat all its employees not as employees but just purely as contractors to essentially keep them away from having rights. And that was won by like a $100 million campaign by Uber, Lyft. I forget who else it was, which is like a fraction of their total value as companies. They dumped $100 million into this messaging to turn taking away rights from Uber drivers into like a progressive message, right? So here, like I said about Azerbaijan in the last stream, like you could easily just like keep people in this like constant state of like not voting appropriately just by the culture war, right? So 306 votes. Sorry, those are margins close enough that this needs to be the question. And this question needs to be answered in a way where the Democratic Party, as presently constituted, is in part, some or largely or mostly, don't pigeonhole yourself into this answer, in some part responsible. The Democratic Party is responsible for America being is what it is. So then when we get these kinds of results, to make an appeal to 306 electoral votes, that's expected. It is what it is. That is a very peculiar form of question begging that we don't do on the Not Your Liberal stream. So let's move on from that. Universalist program, only center of mass that could save us is we need to somehow get a candidate in office that can promise and enact something that is like fucking inertia, that just forever gets people voting for you, right? Because the consequence of not having that is 2024 rolls around. The culture war is not good enough for turnout. Black people continue to accelerate their rise, like in the Republican Party. Kamala Harris is just like a complete, cipher non-entity. Suddenly, we're in a situation where Joe Biden doesn't look good. Kamala Harris, runs and she can't win. And, the culture war on the other side, on the Republican side, it's still there, right? It's still crazy. It's still churning. But like the thing about Republican culture war, like you can never get into a fucking arms race within a Republican culture war, because listen, the Republican culture war, it will always have something, no matter how, outside of reality it's going to have something that you won't have on the liberal side, which is they're able to be so distortionary and just like completely get away with it, right? Like think about the kinds of crazy fucking conspiracies that were surrounding Obama. Yeah, I get it. Like Russiagate was like annoying and it was like over the top and it was melodramatic, but the fact is Mueller was appointed by, in bipartisan fashion. There was a formal criminal investigation into the president because we made the deduction that there was enough evidence to go through with it. And Mueller found, 11 instances of felonies, by Donald Trump that need to be investigated, which of course was not investigated because of the Senate, because we didn't have the time, because whatever. So like, at least that had like some semblance, some relationship to reality. But during the Obama years, it's like, what are you going to talk about? You're going to talk about Benghazi. You're going to talk about Obamagate. You're going to talk about, the fact that Obama does seem very disconnected from the average working person, which, by the way, like that part is true, right? This is the part that can work sometimes, right? Like if all you have is a culture war, you could just play that up forever, 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 because, Republicans aren't going to offer you shit. That's the thing. If you're a fucking Trump voter, if you are stupid enough to vote for Trump, and, I have Trump friends, but, I believe, whether or not they are technically stupid themselves, it is an absolutely stupid fucking decision because you vote for one reason only. You vote for an outcome. You want to get something out of the people you're voting for. You're going to get jack shit out of Trump, except for a culture. And by the way, if you don't need welfare, if you don't need anything, if all you need is to fucking feel good, you could vote for Trump because he's going to play up to your fucking culture war that you love, and you're going to listen to like conservative radio or whatever, and you're going to love that. Like, you could be wealthy, or you could have like a very stable job. You don't need any other shit, and you don't want to pay taxes, right? Like, it's like, fuck it, you already have yours. On the liberal side, you could have done exceptionally well during the Obama years. The Obama economy could have been your economy. That could be the time that you fucking made it. And you know what? The Obama economy hasn't fucking changed. We never made a transition into a Trump economy. The Trump economy is simply an intensification of the Obama economy, right? All those policies that Trump passed, like, yeah, Obama wouldn't have made that kind of tax cut, but we still would have had parabolic assets in the stock market because we still would have had, money being being flooded with the Fed. We would still have corporations more or less in the same position that they're in now, and we'd still have coronavirus, right? It would be a better handle, but we would still have coronavirus. So, and if you did well under that economy, you could make fun of like the right-wing lunatic that votes for Trump, and it's like, well, you get nothing from Trump. Why would you do it? Well, why would you vote for Joe Biden? It's not like he would necessarily change your life, and he won't really change, because there's always that performative contradiction. Nice platform, but the people around or what you actually end up doing, there's always that disconnect, right? There's always that disconnect. Black people, again, we had Obama years, we had Clinton years. Why are black people right now still dealing with levels of depleted wealth that brings them back to 1980s levels, right? That question needs to be answered, right? And that wasn't getting that much better under Obama. So you can't just say it's because we have not enough supermajorities, right? That's bullshit. So what's going to happen in 2024? I'm going to answer some questions, actually. I'm getting tired of talking. All these things just meld together, all these like things in my head. Well, I have more viewers, but I have no new questions. Well, you said never mind, but some people might be asking for more explicitly. What do you think of the polling this year? The polling this year is, well, I mean, look, to go back to the forecast, look, technically North Carolina is lost, Florida is lost. So this simulation, right, it came out this way. We could chop off, at least like a part of the head of that, right? So there's a disconnect from reality, to that degree. There's also the fact that we are, when it comes to like local races and whatnot, we are much closer, and also we are just simply closer to what we would expect given just circumstances and given the polling, given the 10% leads. So polling this year, technically it's off on a polling error, right? That's I think like if you're gonna like break this down like in just like pure data, what happened? There was a polling error in 2016. Clinton could not survive that polling error because she was so disliked. She was so universally hated. She had so many other problems that Joe Biden doesn't have, although Joe Biden has his own problems. So she could not survive her polling error. Joe Biden, he survives his polling error. Well, that's it. If there was another kind of, event tantamount to the effect of a polling error, let's say, some of that, I said, I believe that Joe Biden is corrupt, but the way that people like Glenn Green will talk about it is like pretty silly and not right. And just like, it's just there to like increase the size of Trump and balloon the Trump vote as opposed to balloon the third party vote, which should be the objective of people like Glenn and people like me. And anybody watching this, I hope that this is your part of your motivation. Biden, there could have been like, hey, we opened up an investigation into like Joe Biden's son's dealings. Like there's a criminal investigation. And that could have happened like 2-3 weeks before the election, like with Clinton. And in Clinton, we had the Comey letter is often blamed, but that's just one factor. Another factor was the fact that there was this huge influx of money in the last couple of weeks, even before the Comey letter, which started skewing the polls then, right? Just this huge, like fucking, advertising money that, there are people out there, remember, like you may be a little different, but there are people out there moved by ads. I've hardly seen any ads during the 2020 cycle or 2016, because I mean, why would you watch ads? Like you don't watch corporate ads or political ads really that much better. So anyway, Clinton didn't survive her polling error. Joe Biden did survive his polling error. But I think the more interesting question is, why have we had now in 2016 with like such massive polling errors? Why do we have in 2020 polling errors still? Like the kinks should have been ironed out. Granted, certain things did get better, but certain fundamental issues did not get better. And I have doubts whether they can be ironed out, anytime soon. I don't think it's going to be necessarily all that better in the next 4 or 8 or 12 years, because, in 2016, the issue could have been like, hey, the white vote, we're undercounting the white vote. In 2020, the issue could be we don't get the kind of turnout from black people that we thought. A lot of the proportional advantage is actually not proportional advantage. It's absolute advantage, but proportionally we're getting also votes going to Trump. The margins are thinner elsewhere, and there's maybe something called like a shy Trump voter, but maybe shy Trump voters don't exist in 2024. Maybe you have something else. Maybe you don't have coronavirus. Like to what extent are ballots like like mail-in ballots, like the way they're conducted, or coronavirus the way that it currently is, the way it's been responded to? Like to what extent is it skewing results, right? And to what extent is 2024 going to be different, right? So I'm not. I was looking forward to this being more right than it was. I think any kind of polls from this point forward have to be just assumed as like exactly what we assumed in 2016. Best case scenario, everything is much closer than what we think it is. Worst case scenario, we are operating under a 2016 level mirage. Okay, so hopefully that answers the polling question.